Welcome to the Short Funk Podcast. I'm Tom Barbalet, and today, Veterans Day. Veterans Day is a holiday in the US. Well, it's not really a holiday because, like most things in the US, very few companies actually adhere to supporting public holidays. But Veterans Day is a day in the US that I think is probably the vanguard of the thought processes that I would like to enact in society. My perspective associated with Veterans Day, and I have a few family members that have fought in various conflicts, a number of family members that died in various conflicts, and I have a perspective associated with veterans, particularly in the culture of conscripted veterans and volunteer veterans, that causes me questions associated with my own particular views. And I think that's why Veterans Day sits so uneasily with me. Every year, Bank of America, which is unfortunately the financial institution that I have to be bonded to in this country, runs a Veterans Day ad that refers to the current veterans thanking the future veterans. And as you listen to Short Funk, you might hear a narrative, particularly when I talk about things like the Australian War Memorial, where my particular view, which came from early childhood, was that humans possess the resources, the intellectual and analytical resources, that wars should really be a thing of the past. The kinds of disagreements, the kinds of disputes that occur currently relate to conflicts that could have been avoided through a variety of relatively basic practices. When we look at the post-conflict for the past 20 years, the attacks on the US and 9/11 and what occurred after that, I've already provided analysis in these Short Funk recordings associated with my own particular perspective, both associated with the legacy that led up to 9/11, but also associated with bin Laden's extensive funding and connection with the US. In fact, it's almost like these conflicts are now being completely created by funders in Washington, rather than being actual conflicts that relate to independent ideas and agendas. So when you look at the likes of ISIS, when you look at the likes of Al-Qaeda, when you look at the likes of Saddam Hussein, when you look at the likes of the Taliban, these are all entities that have had some financial connection with the US, either in direct financial funding or in the supply of arms and sometime through their history. And the thought processes that are enacted that allowed these groups to get funding are still in power and are still in positions where they can continue to do these same behaviors if there isn't a public discussion associated with these behaviors. So in the case of Veterans Day, I appreciate that there is a large volunteer army that volunteered to go and participate in various conflicts for a variety of reasons. However, I don't think this narrative should necessarily be connected with my views. My perspective is actually of the veterans that I meet, many of them were in forced conscription situations where they made the decision to enlist rather than being conscripted and sent out in the front lines of particular jungles or what have you, that this is a very different and very interesting personal reflection for each one of these individuals. So it's difficult for me as, again, another individual, to make any kind of judgment call or any kind of historical narrative in order to justify my particular perspectives. If I was to return to one idea, it was the notion that humans now should possess the intellectual and diagnostic resources to remove the nature of war from a new generation. I'm incredibly disappointed that this wasn't enacted with my generation or my parents' generation. And I think the major wars and conflicts that defined the early 20th century should have given enough resources, intellectual resources, to the population to stop these kind of conflicts going forwards. Those who create wars, those that define countries going to war, and the mentality associated with that should be looked at with extreme suspicion. Tom Barbalet in San Jose, signing out.